Bill Gates, thank you for speaking with us. You've always been a problem solver. Personal computers, fighting tropical diseases. Now you're working to solve climate change. What's the biggest challenge facing you in that fight?
Well, climate change is very unjust because most of the suffering will be the poor, particularly who have to farm to get enough food, and when their crop fails, they suffer disease and malnutrition. So, the speed with which this needs to be done is very daunting.
How fast do we need to move?
Well, we've set ambitious goals, trying to get to zero by 2050. Some countries are on board and making progress with that, but, when you have global problems, it's tough to get everyone, not just every country, but every sector of emissions to move quickly.
We're here in Dubai, which is obviously in an oil country. The president of COP28 is the CEO of one of the largest oil companies in the world. I know that you have actually said in the past that you would welcome anybody to the table, whether they're an activist or even an oil company. What do you make then of this COP being set here in Dubai?
Well, I think, they're doing a very strong job of hosting this, which is a complex thing to do. Over time, through carbon taxes and by innovating on the clean side, we want to outcompete all oil use. If there was a country that didn't buy oil and had zero emissions, great, let's have the conference there. And that country, doesn't exist. So, I think this meeting is an important event. I think there'll be lots of collaborations that come out of this. For an activist,
is it an opportunity, or is it something that's holding back negotiations, having oil companies more at the center of the process?
I mean, when we're doing meetings about clean steel, clean cement, the location we're in, or the wealth that created the economic success here, that's not influencing this. I mean, we're here to get carbon emissions to zero as fast as we can.
I want to ask you about why you're here at COP28 in Dubai. I think a lot of us associate you with these whiz-bang innovations, but that's not exactly the case here, right?
Well, I consider seeds that can deal with high temperature, or seeds that are more productive, it's pretty whiz-bang stuff. So the Gates Foundation is very involved in adaptation, and that's how I saw that climate was a big thing, is that the farmers in these poor countries were having their crops fail, and that was leading to malnutrition and even more childhood death. So it's through that lens that I feel the urgency.
And what exactly will you be working on when it comes to agriculture? What's the biggest problem that needs solving?
But if we can make these crops still thrive, despite the higher temperatures and the droughts that will take place, then we can continue the upward path of human development that we've been on. It's important that we lift people out of poverty, because that's when you live in a house that can have air conditioning, and you have a savings account so that if you have a bad harvest, you're not starving because of that. And we owe it to these developing countries to minimize the impacts and to help them adapt.
How do you innovate when it comes to agriculture? You said that seeds are whiz-bang to you. What does that mean? How can we change something that seems so fundamental to adapt to these rising temperatures that we're seeing?
Well, in the 1960s and 70s, as the Asian populations grew, people worried about widespread starvation. And fortunately, because the CG system that does the seed work came up with far more productive varieties, what was called the Green Revolution. In fact, calories per person in Asia went up during that time frame. And so it was not without some challenges, but that was kind of a miracle. Now we need to take a broader set of crops, including the ones that are used in Africa, and we need to deal with the the challenge that the weather is tougher for farming. It's an outdoor activity. Most of it doesn't have irrigation. And so that's where the most suffering from climate will be unless we improve the inputs, including the seeds.
Help us put a human face on that problem. I know you've actually visited some small farmers in rural areas. What have they told you? How are they being affected by climate change?
Yeah, so I was out in rural Kenya, and they were using these drought-tolerant crops, a drought-tolerant maize that the foundation was involved in. But that woman actually was getting most of her income from the chickens she was raising. And so by taking the genetics of the chicken, the very high productivity ones that are in the temperate zone, and crossbreeding with the chickens that can deal with the heat, she was getting a variety where she was selling the eggs, selling the meat, and thriving. And so that was a case where it was empowering women, it was improving nutrition, and made her climate resilient.
How do you now take the problem of agriculture being affected by climate change? We're seeing droughts, we're seeing famines. How do you ramp up the solutions to that? Where will you be looking to put your resources?
Well, the CG system is this great organization, not well known, that does the seed work. And the Gates Foundation is the biggest funder of that work, and we're encouraging others. You know, if you care about climate, if you care about nutrition, the impact of a dollar that goes in is pretty amazing, because you get millions of farmers each benefiting from the work you did. And it's not just the seeds. You also want to get them weather information, you know, so that they know when to plant. You want advice, you know, when they run into problems. So all the different things that raise agricultural productivity, even in the face of climate.
And I know here in Dubai, you know, there's some big numbers involved with what you're announcing, a $200 million pledge to reach 500 million farmers by the end of the decade. I mean, talk about the scale that we're talking about here.
Well, you know, crops like maize, wheat, rice, you know, every improvement you make for disease resistance there has a global impact. There are crops like some of the beans, sorghum, cassava, that are more important for Africa, and so they've been kind of ignored to date. So the extra resources for the CG system allows them to go after a much broader set of crops than were ever advanced during the first green revolution.